Welcome to the first edition of Can We Talk? My name is Shawnee Neely, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with Spring Eternal. And this is our wonderful panel of therapists, and I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Mauricia Palmer, a licensed marriage and family therapist and a licensed professional counselor.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Harold Rayfield. I'm a licensed professional counselor.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Damon Herbert. I am a licensed professional counselor under supervision at this time.
Okay, so today our topic is, can a person go to therapy without their partner? So there's different thoughts and opinions about if I want to go to counseling and my husband or boyfriend doesn't want to go, should I still go? So I'm just going to put that question out and see.
And we have kind of mixed views about that, not necessarily opposing opinions, but there's different perspectives that we kind of want to talk about regarding that. Because one thing we have talked about before, and Damon, maybe just kind of talk about how you express the importance of when you're a couple, why it's important to have couples counseling, and then we'll kind of talk about how you can get some individual help for issues.
Well, and my thoughts are, if we're doing couples counseling, then it's very imperative that both parties are there so that we're not just getting one side of the relationship. It's also important to the couple, to the relationship, that we're both there. Because one person just can't, the relationship isn't just one person, the relationship is two people. So it is important that that second person, even though you may not be as willing to, but if that relationship is important to you, then sometimes I feel like you have to give a little bit.
Well, what about the perspective of this? No, so I've been in a relationship. This is my fourth relationship, and in this fourth relationship, I'm having the same problems that I had in relationship number one, relationship number two. So at that point, if my relationship number four, he doesn't want to go counseling, can I benefit if I say, well, maybe I just need to go in?
Can I answer that?
Absolutely.
Hey, well, then the problem is you. If you got the same issue in 4 different relationships, the problem is you.
Okay.
And so, absolutely, you can benefit from going. And more than likely, it's you who needs the individual counseling. Because whatever you're giving or whatever other people perceive you as, then that's how they treat you. So whenever you're in a relationship, you're teaching your partner how to treat you. So if you're always constantly finding yourself in these positions, these relationships where other people are mistreating you, it's something that you're doing to contribute to that process.
Okay. So could it be that maybe I'm just attracting the same partner? Maybe I'm really not a bad person, but maybe I'm just attracting the same partner to treat me the same bad way. Does it have to be me, or can it be that person?
It can be you. It can be what you like. You know, we all have our quote unquote types that we go for. You know, some folks like bad guys. Some people like tall people. You know, everybody has certain things that they like. But on that same note, you do have to look at yourself, and you do have to look at, what am I doing? If you're finding yourself in these same situations, like Mr. Rayfield said, if it's been 4 relationships and you keep finding yourself by yourself at the end of the day, maybe you need to look at what it is that you're doing and how you're approaching these conversations and these relationships with these people, because you're the common denominator at that point.
And you know, Damon, when I was online, I look at various marriage and family websites and different systems and books, and I saw 3 different times where they said, if your partner won't go, you can still go, and just like Mr. Rayfield said, try to make some personal changes, and then just watch how that changes your partner or affects your partner. So if I'm so type A one day, but then I go through my little program, and now I'm less of an irritating type A, will that change my behavior with my mate, right? Like, I'm not so irritated, I'm just a little bit. And so I believe that can be, because anytime you change yourself, everybody around you has to change the way that they react to you. But still, what Damon said, both people have to be committed to saying that we recognize a problem and let's try this for a solution. So I can't just go whole route without the other person being involved.
Exactly. And I don't want it to seem as though I'm saying that folks shouldn't go to counseling individually, but my thinking was, when we're talking specifically or exclusively about couples relationships, then yes, we need to be a couple. But if you're just wanting to learn maybe some things about yourself and how you can be better in the relationship, if you identify that you don't communicate well, then maybe it would benefit you to go, as Shawnee said, to one of those programs where they have an individual track program. Excuse me, because you may learn something like speaker listener techniques or using XYZ statements, things of that nature that can help you in your relationships, and it still qualifies as couples counseling.
Absolutely. So let's use some specific examples. One of the things that we didn't share and I like for us to do is to talk about where we are in our own personal journeys. And I just think that's important because I think we all bring different perspectives to the table. And I'll just kind of share just a little bit about me. I am single. I have been married. I've been divorced now for about, 11 years, I think it is. I've been divorced for a while and being a single parent. So I bring a different perspective as far as relationships and dating. And so I like for us to kind of, I'll share where we are and how, if you're married, how long you've been married. That way our audience can kind of know the perspective that we're coming from.
I'm married. I've been married for 5 years. We've been together for 10 years. And actually, we're a very non-traditional married couple because a lot of things that people, a lot of the traditions like, we're going to celebrate this or that. Some things are not as high on our value list as others, and so sometimes people don't understand where we come from when that happens. So this past year was the first time that we really celebrated our anniversary. We would either be in 2 different towns. First year we actually forgot. Next year, there's a lot going on. Okay, so non-traditional because for some people that wouldn't be acceptable. But
Right.
So I've been married for 5 years.
But it's a good thing both of y'all forgot. Not
Right,
'cause
right,
most
right.
times it's like,
Right.
the husband don't
Yeah,
know.
you're like,
Good
what's
one,
this story?
Shani. I am single, never married. I am a father of 2 daughters, and again, like I said, I do have 2 babies mamas. And so I do have some, I admire folks who are married. I do plan on wanting to get married one day.
I do plan on wanting to get that.
No, but because really, honestly, and me just opening up a little bit, I grew up in a 2-parent home. So I've always seen myself as married and wanting to get married. But sometimes as we get older and we see things out here in the world, some days I'm not really sure about if I still want to get married. I know that, I do want a companion because, you want to enjoy moments in life, and maybe my wedding will be a little bit like yours, Shani, and it might not be a traditional marriage, but one day I do believe it'll happen for me.
Cool. That's awesome. So, I have been married for 13 years. I have been with my wife for 17 years. So we've been at it a long time.
You all have learned a lot.
Absolutely.
Each other
I
grew up a
have
little bit.
learned a lot.
About
Can I book
yourself
a session?
and her.
Yes.
I want to book a session with you.
Well, I appreciate y'all sharing. I think that's important that everybody kind of knows where we're coming from when we start sharing these different perspectives. So if we go back to our original topic about self and exploration, one of the things that Damon mentioned is he said that he may one day want to get married. So when you're talking about that as an individual and the relationships that you've had, have there been things that you've seen in yourself that you feel like maybe you can work on individually before you make that connection with somebody that would be helpful?
Yes, definitely. Especially in my younger days, in my 20s, you have to learn to compromise. When you're in a relationship and you want to be with somebody and you're in it for the long haul, it's not always going to be what you want when you want it. You have to be able to bend a little bit, and you have to be able to let your partner have some leeway or some of the things that they're wanting. You have to negotiate, and you can't just up and go. If you're in the relationship for the long haul and you want to be married, we gonna get mad, we gonna argue, but you can't just get up and leave.
Right.
Commitment.
Exactly.
Right. Well, will you want to chime in on that at all about the commitment and compromise? I know with 17 years, it had to be a lot of compromising going on.
Oh man, listen. Marriage is a constant negotiation. So I was telling some clients yesterday. I said, if you are negotiating in your marriage, that means you guys are operating off an old contract. And so you don't want to be in 2018 living off of what you guys agreed upon back from 2011, because your partner has changed and you've changed, and that's how discontent and apathy grows in your relationship. That's where voids come in, because you guys aren't functioning on a shared vision. So it's definitely a compromise. You're gonna lose a lot of times, guys. You're gonna lose a lot of the time.
Oh my God.
I take so many L's that it's ridiculous, but it's all in the best interest of love. And so, and my partner, my wife, she does as well. She does a great job of being flexible, and so, but it's definitely the ebb and flow of life, man. It's ups and it's downs, it's good and it's bad. So.
How does that one saying go? Happy wife, happy
Happy,
life.
happy wife, happy life. The only problem is you don't know what makes them happy.
Here we
I'm
go.
gonna give you a
And
list.
they can't tell you what make them happy.
You got a baseline of what makes her
That's it.
happy,
It's
though,
like you
right?
got the foundation.
Good idea, like
I kinda think I know.
tacos, gifts. You
Ask her to
know.
send you an email, and I'm pretty sure you get.
Right. And then when you get the list and then you do
You
it,
just start chipping stuff off. the
right,
list.
right. And then you expecting, and then when it don't happen, you're like, okay, what just, okay, why are we not, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another show, another topic.
I have a quick question though. I was thinking about Dr. Palmer as far as you stating being divorced and single.
Mhm.
So what if you were put in a situation for having to go to couples counseling and the partner didn't come? You know, how would you handle that?
Well, it just depends. Like, I really feel like, me personally, I have been on my own journey, and that's something that I want to do, just the individual session to kind of talk about, so I can kind of explore that and what the challenges were with that. But I feel like I had to do my work individually as a person. When you go through situations, you have to look back over the course of your life and the course of your relationships, and then you got to go past that. I had to look at my mother, my father, his relationship, his marriages, my grandmother. You know, on one side of my family it's a lot of divorce, and on the other side of the family it's not a lot of marriage at all. So it's just like you have to kind of explore and look at that and say, okay, I didn't learn what healthy relationships look like. So that's what I think individual therapy is important. So you can explore that, because if you just on the outside, you wouldn't really pay attention to that. You're not really thinking about it. Then when you get to talking and processing through, it's like, you know, I never thought of it. I never looked at my genogram. I never looked at all this division and all this non-married and kids born out of wedlock and stuff. You don't see all of that. And so I just think that you have to do your own exploration.
And see, I think that's why it's so important, because Damon was talking about the couple needs to be committed, but also individual work, because as an individual you can find out about yourself, what's going on, and then you bring how you bring that to the relationship, and then it may not just be the other person. You might determine that it's you that needs the work.
Absolutely. And I think that is something I did discover in counseling, is my independence. You know, when you grow up with a single mom and she struggled, my grandfather died when we were really young. And so it was my grandmother, my mother, and 2 girls. So of course my mother had to teach us, be independent. You know, you need to know how to change your tire, you need to know how to get your oil changed, you need to know how to mow the yard, you know, you need to know how to do all those things. So when you get, that's instilled in you to be strong and to give you that strength. When you get in a relationship, to relinquish some of those roles, or to understand that people don't just jump when you say, because you want the yard cut, that doesn't mean that the other person's going to cut it right that moment. So just different things you have to really, really explore and pay attention to.
That's definitely good. One thing that Dr. Palmer mentioned that I think is really important, and I wanted to know how you guys feel about it, is the healthy relationships and the examples of the healthy relationships. You know, one thing that I've noticed, and I don't want to offend anybody, but it's a very big difference between dating somebody who grew up in a single parent family and dating somebody who grew up with both of their parents. Have you all noticed that, or did that maybe guide you towards your husbands or your wives?
Okay, I have to laugh on this one. Let me tell you. I found that, you know, that saying that you marry your parent, and that's exactly what happened to me. Because I grew up and my dad was a very dominant figure in his family and in, you know, our family unit. So that's what I saw as what a man was. And so being subconsciously attracted to my husband when I was dating him, I didn't know they were in the same profession. That floored me, first of all. Like, how did this happen? Then as time went on, I mean, it took me years to really see it. You know, you get out of the lust and the old fuzzy phase to real life phase, and I'm like, oh my God, he is just like my daddy. Good and bad.
Right.
But I knew how to deal with it because I grew up with my dad.
Right.
So then I'm like, but I'm just like my mom. Good and bad. So it's really like a shocking moment. And then being a therapist, when you studied all these books and you've read all these articles and you talked to all these other therapists, And so I'm self-diagnosing, right? Like, and I got my list of 20. Well, first I started with his list of 20. Then I got to my list. And it just went back to what the book said, that I was attracted to a person that was just like my parent. And so my relationship is similar to my parents' relationship.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I think that's true because and Damon, I think it also depends on whether you a healthy marriage was modeled in front of you or whether it was non-healthy. Because I think a lot of times, me growing up with my mom, even though she was divorced and it was us girls, there was no dysfunction. It wasn't unhealthy. You know what I mean? She taught us to be strong, but she taught us about love and she taught us about, caring for people. There was no abuse and, any of that.
Right.
But if you grow up in a two-parent home and you've been beat or you've been sexually violated or you don't learn to communicate because somebody's dominates. I have a couple now that I'm working with where the husband kind of dominates, and she grew up in a household where that's kind of like you were talking about, you're marrying your parent. But her dad did the same thing, just dominated. Mom didn't really get a chance to talk a lot. So now she's found herself in a position where she's like, I want to express myself, but I don't feel like I can. So I think it just depends. It is a difference, but I think it depends on the healthiness or unhealthiness of the
Of that
household.
relationship.
So what about this? And since we're talking about looking at what the patterns were, look at the generation before us. So did we see married couples or couples going to counseling? I didn't.
No.
I don't know about going to counseling,
Right.
but I
No.
did see married couples, growing up. There was a few of us in my neighborhood that actually had both parents in the home. Now, and not to get off the subject of what you were talking about, Shani, but the healthy relationships. I don't think that people necessarily know what a healthy relationship is. We all have our own definition of healthy, but again, we might look at the relationships that our mom had or dad had, or even relationships that our grandparents had. But I think one thing that we forget is grandma went through a lot of stuff with granddad that we didn't see as kids.
Right.
You
Because
know,
back in our day, kids were not seen.
you wasn't allowed
Or-
to
Right.
be
Right.
around anybody.
Right.
Ain't no kids in here, so I'm
Right.
grown folks.
Right.
Bye.
Right.
So we may not necessarily know a lot of times when grandma was biting her tongue or when granddad was out drinking or might have that side family on the other side of town that grandma know about, but he take care of home, so she's still she's still there.
Yeah. We didn't know if you were through with your
Yeah,
thoughts.
I'm sorry, that's all.
But yeah, Shani, back to what you were saying about, I think you're right. We don't realize that counseling is important because our family didn't go through it. We have to look at, especially in the African American community, traditionally, we kept our business in the house. We said things like, just pray about it, or we went and we talked to the pastor about it. And there's nothing wrong with those situations. But I think something that we have to be real careful about is being honest and being able to say, okay, you know what, I need somebody else to help me.
Damon was talking about, have we seen healthy relationships modeled? Do we know what a healthy relationship is? And then I'm just thinking about the generation before us. If a healthy relationship consists of going to counseling, how many people saw that in our generation, in our culture? Probably very few. And if you did see it, it was probably a really bad situation, and one person was probably forced to go, and the other didn't want to. So I don't have hardly any examples of two willing people older than me who said we're gonna go work on our relationship.
Right.
So that's why the topic was like, should one person go without the other? It's like I'm really split on that. Because I don't see anything wrong with trying to improve yourself, myself.
Right.
I do see that both people need to be committed, but it's still nothing wrong if you still want to go seek some help.
Right. I definitely, and I agree with you on that. When you are in a relationship and you have some rough patches and you have some things going on and it's hard for the two of you to work that out, then counseling may not be a bad thing. It may be good for the both of you to go to counseling, but also on that same note, you both may need to go to individual counseling.
Yeah.
Right.
Just to get your mind around what counseling is. You may have questions about counseling that you need answered before you comfortable going in there, opening up in front of your woman, depending on how long you've been with that young lady. I know that a lot of couples before they get married, they do marriage counseling. Some churches do require that you have counseling with your pastor. And, you know, I'm not knocking the pastors, but sometimes you have to step outside of your church, because pastor may know a little bit too much, you know, and pastor may have some biases and some feelings. But it's nothing wrong with getting some individual counseling first before you go to that couples counseling. And again, it definitely goes back to the commitment to the relationship.
Harold, have you had any situations where somebody came in for couples counseling and you would thought, you know what, maybe I need to see you individually for a little bit, and we need to work on some
Oh, yeah.
issues before we.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've had several couples come in, and they seem like they were going to be working on, as a couple, on their issues or their challenges, but when it came to it, it really turned into an individual session.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really was one person really had some things they just had to work out. And it was, those things were holding them back from really being connected and committed. And it wasn't for a lack of, you know, them being a good match or them not really having good intentions, just past experiences, past relationships, you know, brokenness can
Right.
sometimes just keep you guys from really gelling the way it takes, because marriage takes so much in order for it to work. You know, I always tell the, you know, clients and people that love is not enough. You know,
Right.
you know, marriage and, you know, and being in a long-term relationship, it's an actual skill. So I didn't see it growing up where anybody, you know, in my family went to counseling or even went to like the church to talk about it. It was kind of a, that's our business, we'll take care of it in the house. And then you kind of go over to the family reunion, and then you just kind of see your aunt and uncle just acting fool. You're just like, oh, well, that's them, that's marriage, it's all good, because the next time you see them, then they cool. They, you know, they're rolling and kissing and hugging. So you're like, okay, that's just kind of what I see. But we never really talk about the skill of marriage. Like,
Right.
what are the things that you do to make it work?
Right. And you know what else I think individually? I think we have unrealistic expectations of what
Oh,
marriage
yeah.
is. And I see that all the time. You know, having been married and having had relationships following my marriage, and even just being in the chair to see other people's problems, I think that we have this fantasy. TV makes us unrealistic. You got stuff like Lifetime and Hallmark, you know, and I watch it because it takes me out of reality sometimes.
I like
But,
it.
you know, I think it gives us an unrealistic expectation. You know, one of the couples that I'm working with now, you know, especially sometimes the wives are just, I don't understand. He just doesn't hear this baby up at night, but I hear it. You know, it's just things that, and people want to divorce over those things. And sometimes
Right.
you got to realize that it's not necessarily that he's not doing things. People don't typically intentionally want to get a divorce. You know, they don't typically wake up and say, today I'm going to piss my spouse off because I want a divorce. It doesn't happen that way. It's something that's going on that within themselves that they haven't been able to work out
Right.
in order to develop that skill like you talked about that takes to make a marriage work. And so, I don't know.
And definitely when you look at getting married, like Harold said, more than love, you know, and like somebody told me a long time ago, when you're looking to get married and you willing to be with somebody that long, you have to know whose stuff you willing to put up with.
Right.
You know, what can you as an individual put up with? What can you take? What can you not take? It's funny, you said you were talking about the woman getting up in the middle of the night feeding the baby. With one of my exes, we stayed together, and I remember going to a doctor's appointment, and she was talking to the nurse. She was like, well, he don't get up in the middle of the night and feed the baby, but he gets up with me. And the nurse told her,
Oh.
that's good, because my husband is just there like a log, like a log, just knocked out. And so you have to I think sometimes talking to somebody and letting them know how you feel about things, you realize this might not be as big of a deal as I'm making.
Right.
And so to add to that, so we talked about, like, you know, what I call a non-traditional marriage, because of what society puts out there is this is what should be important to you. This is what the man should do, the woman should do. And so people, they look at that, like you said, they fantasize, when I get married, it's going to be like that, but that's not real life. So me and my husband early on, he's divorced. He had been married before for 10 years, so he had already known the truth. So when we met as friends, he was able to communicate to me, nah, this is not real. That's not real. So you go into it with a little, I don't want to say lower expectations, but more realistic expectations.
Right.
Like, this is not going to be fantasy. We're not going to be jumping up and down every day.
Right.
Hi, you know, there's good
Right.
days and bad days.
Right.
But you have to have a strategy. So I had a friend tell me, when you get married, don't just get married for love. You better have a strategy. So you work together with things with your spouse. Y'all have common goals. and separate interests. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people feel like, well, I can't go on a trip without my spouse. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the things that I feel are
Please go.
right. Or it's kind of unacceptable to see a married person hanging out with single people. So those are some of the things where I feel like that stuff is not on my value list.
Right.
I know who I am, I know who he is, I know who we are. And so just because TV puts it out there or that's top on people's list, that's not important to us. And if as long as we agree on that, then we're good. So you can't let other people's expectations dictate your marriage.
Absolutely.
And people's expectations are just so kind of outlandish. Like when people get married, a lot of times they get married for the actual ceremony. You know, they get married for the picture of, hey, we got a house, we got a dog, we want 2 kids, we both got nice jobs, and he got a BMW and I got an Infiniti. And they think that's it. And that as long as those things are components of the relationship, we're good. And that's not even close to even being what marriage is. That, you know, that is the byproduct. When you see couples at Chili's eating or wherever they're eating steak dinner, that's the byproduct of a lot of hard work Monday through Friday. Saturday night and Sundays in church is not, you know, that's not really the work that marriage is about. It's all the stuff that happens when nobody's around. That's what makes it work. That's what makes it special.
So Damon, had you ever been, close enough to think about marriage? You know what I'm saying?
Don't put him on the
I
spot
was,
like that.
no,
because
at
I
one
don't
point,
see
I don't have no problem answering that. And there was a point where I was gonna ask one of my exes to marry me. We were both in our master's program, and I was gonna ask her to marry me once we both completed our master's program. But unfortunately, the relationship just didn't really last that long. And that's one thing. Like we were talking about expectations. I think that people have to be realistic and understanding that a relationship not gonna always be 50-50. You know, we both have to put in our 100%, and the roles may change at times. You know, there may be times where I'm slacking on something, and baby, I need you to pick up where I'm falling off.
Right.
And it can't be, oh, when I'm sick of him and he, you know, or vice versa. Well, she don't do this and she don't feed the kids. You know, a lot of us dudes, when it comes to kids, we kind of hands off, and we have to get a little bit more hands on with our kids or other things, whatever it may be. We may have to wash dishes or cook dinner, and you just have to be realistic that when you're in that relationship, it's not going to always be this picture that they paint on TV and things like that, like you guys were saying before.
So now are your expectations, though, say that was some years ago, do you look back on what you thought marriage was at that time, and now as being a therapist and, you know, talking in different groups, do you have a different?
My outlook on relationships, yes, because, and again, I think it goes back to me as an individual. I can look back on that relationship and see things that I did that I could have changed. You know, I see things where I could have bent a little bit. Yeah, I could have been a little bit better with my communication and things that I was doing. So,
Absolutely. Well, what I would like to do is today is our first day. We're getting started. We are going to do these series ongoing. We have a lot of different topics. We're going to talk about finances. We're going to talk about intimacy. We're going to talk about parenting. We're going to talk about a lot of different issues. So if you all can stay tuned and follow us on YouTube, we will present more of these topics. We're also going to have some guest speakers. I'm going to share my personal journey. I've decided I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I think that's real important, so we'll do that as well. So just stay tuned and follow us on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.